Imagine a world where Kaiser Wilhelm II sends a telegram to London in 1920. We accept your terms of neutrality. Paris has fallen. The Channel is secure. The war is over. This isn't the world of swastikas and blitzkriegs. There are no Nazis in this story. No D-Day, no Churchill speeches over crackling radios. This is the other war. The first one. The one that left Europe in mud and barbed wire. The one that broke empires, but in this version, didn't break Germany. Instead of being carved up at Versailles, Germany stands tall, victorious. The Kaiser still wears his spiked helmet. The French army is in retreat. And the British? They're watching, weary and calculating, from across the Channel. So what happens next? If Germany had won World War I, not the second, how would that have changed the entire 20th century? Would there even be a World War II? Would the United States have become a global superpower? Would Stalin rise without Hitler to oppose him? This is alternate history, yes, but not alternate fantasy. No time machines, no steampunk empires, just the fragile chain of real decisions, accidents, and egos that could have easily bent the world in another direction. This is the story of a peace too early, an empire too confident, and a century that unfolded very differently. All because the First War didn't end the way it did for us. Let's rewind to 1917, the year everything could have tipped the other way. Russia, as in our timeline, is collapsing. The Tsar is out. The Bolsheviks are rising. Chaos. The Eastern Front is dissolving like wet paper. And Germany sees opportunity. Now picture this. The Zimmermann telegram never makes it to American headlines. Maybe it's intercepted and quietly buried. Or maybe isolationist voices in Congress drown out Wilson's war drums. Either way, the United States never enters the war. That leaves Germany with one front, the West. And in 1918, the spring offensive doesn't stall. It breaks through. French morale shatters. Paris falls. British troops retreat toward the Channel, scrambling to evacuate. By the time Germany calls for peace, it isn't surrendering. It's dictating terms. The Treaty of Berlin replaces Versailles. France is carved up. Reparations flow east instead of west. And Berlin? Berlin glows with victory parades and imperial pride. Britain survives, yes. The Royal Navy stays untouched. But their influence has dimmed. The pound weakens. The empire begins its slow, early fade. London becomes a humbled capital, watching the continent reshape without it. And so, instead of the war to end all wars, we get the war that proved the empire right. No League of Nations, no Wilsonian dream, just a Kaiserreich vindicated by history. But victory brings its own problems. With no humiliating loss, there's no Weimar Republic, no national shame, no political vacuum for someone like Hitler to crawl into. Instead, Berlin is smug, confident, and dangerously satisfied. And history? Well, it's about to twist in ways we can barely recognize. Welcome to the 1920s, or rather, the beginning of the German century. In this world, Berlin isn't just the capital of Germany, it's the heartbeat of a new Europe. A victorious Germany redraws borders not with ink, but with contracts. Poland becomes a polite client state. Belgium, a protectorate, governed with a handshake and a wink. The Middle Europa Economic Zone is born, a trading bloc wrapped in iron and industry. The Ottoman Empire doesn't collapse. There's no Sykes-Picot, no messy mandates. Instead, Istanbul stays afloat, held up by German advisors and investment. The Middle East becomes an economic satellite rather than a colonial battleground. And Berlin, well, Berlin glows. Picture Weimar-era cabarets, avant-garde artists, jazz, cinema, but without the fragile economy beneath it. There's no inflation spiral, no street fights between red and brown shirts. Just confidence and gold-backed stability. The Great Depression never reaches Berlin. In fact, Germany becomes the anchor keeping Europe upright while the US struggles with its own market crash. German marks flow into Austria, Hungary, even into southern France. But here's the twist. In this stable order, communism never gets its spark. No Soviet satellites, no uprisings. Germany, worried about Bolsheviks leaking across borders, quietly funds right-wing groups across the continent. Fascism doesn't march through Rome, it wears suits in Warsaw. Somewhere in London, over tea and sighs, a British prime minister leans in and mutters, "German order has prevented Bolshevism." The ambassador smiles. "It has indeed. And such order," he adds, "must be preserved." So while the trains run on time and the borders hold steady, something colder creeps beneath it all. A Europe so carefully organized it forgets how to breathe. Because sometimes peace can be too efficient, and empires don't just conquer through war, they do it through paperwork, planning, and the promise of never letting chaos in again. So, no Versailles Treaty, no brutal reparations, no hyperinflation. Germany walks away from the Great War not in ruins, but in triumph. And without that chaos, no Hitler, no NSDAP, no angry men in beer halls shouting about betrayal, no brown shirts clashing with communists in the streets, just silence where a storm could have been. But don't get too comfortable, because authoritarianism doesn't vanish. It just changes outfits. In France, defeat festers. A nationalist military junta rises from the ashes of the republic. They don't want peace, they want payback. Speeches in Paris promise restoration. Flags flutter, soldiers march, eyes look east. Italy, Mussolini still claws his way up, but now instead of being the loud fascist outlier, he's Germany's little brother. Rome doesn't resist Berlin, it imitates it. And Russia? Stalin takes power. But without Hitler, without a world war to justify a massive Red Army buildup, the Soviet Union turns inward. Stalin still purges, still fears enemies behind every door. But the USSR stays cold and cautious, more barbed wire than expansionist tanks. So what causes the next crisis? Not ideology, not revolution, empire. The British still hold the seas. The Germans rule the land. Each watches the other's colonies with thinly veiled envy. Africa, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. Lines are drawn and redrawn, then drawn again. Trade disputes heat up. Advisors whisper about oil. Railways snake into contested zones. Peace holds, but only just. And here's the twist. Most people think peace means freedom blooms. Democracy wins, rights flourish, but not here. In this version of the 20th century, peace means Germany writes the rules. And those rules are built for order, for control, for empire. Democracy, it isn't crushed, it's simply never invited in. It turns out, winning World War I doesn't freeze the world in place. It scrambles the map in strange, powerful ways. Africa, for one, doesn't shake off its chains. Germany keeps its colonies and expands them. Southwest Africa becomes a settler state, complete with railroads and Prussian architecture. Togo and Cameroon transform into fortress colonies, militarized outposts projecting Berlin's reach deep into the continent. In the Middle East, everything looks unrecognizable. No British mandates, no French borders, no Balfour Declaration, no Israel. Palestine becomes just another province of a reforming Ottoman Empire, coached along by German advisors. Baghdad becomes a rail hub. The Berlin to Basra railway is completed, humming with soldiers and steel. Oil flows west. Control flows east. Then there's Asia. Japan, hungry as ever, keeps expanding. But instead of confronting the United States, they find resistance from a new Pacific Pact, one led not from Washington, but from Berlin. German-backed China becomes the counterweight. The war in the Pacific never erupts, it simmers. A Cold War. Long before we coined the term. Back in the US, things are weird. No New Deal. Roosevelt never gets the kind of mandate he needs. Isolationists dominate Congress. American fascists, groups like the Silver Shirts, suddenly don't look so fringe. The 1930s feel less like the calm before the storm and more like a country waiting for someone to flip a coin. And here's the irony. The world thinks it avoided the nightmare of World War II. Didn't. It just moved the fight somewhere else. Instead of trench warfare, we get proxy wars. Instead of global alliances for peace, we get armored trade zones and embassies full of spies. Berlin, Tokyo, London, Istanbul. The war never ended. It just changed uniforms. This is the Cold War before it was cool. A world run by industrial powers who never had to rebuild, so they never had to pause. Just compete. And that's the secret of a peaceful German victory. It didn't bring peace. It brought ambition. Sometimes the most important parts of history are the ones that don't happen. There is no Holocaust, no death camps, no industrial genocide. But that doesn't mean the world is free from hatred. Anti-Semitism still exists, just quieter, institutional. The Jewish population, sensing the winds, begins to leave Europe earlier. Some go to Latin America, others to Central Asia. A few try to disappear entirely. There is no NATO, no United Nations, no grand experiment in global cooperation. Instead, Germany proposes a continental accord, a diplomatic forum that looks peaceful but smells like policy control. Member states smile in public and compromise in private, all while Berlin steers the wheel. There's no D-Day, no storming of beaches, no Allied flags waving over ruined cities, and there's no Manhattan Project. Nuclear weapons arrive slower, without the panic of World War to justify the cost. Some say Germany gets there first. Others say the United States, working in a cold silence, beats them quietly. Either way, the bomb is born, just not with the same urgency. There's no Cold War as we knew it, no Cuban Missile Crisis, no Berlin Wall. But there's something else, a global tension you can't quite name. Germany and Japan, allies once, now glare at each other from opposite corners of the world. Southeast Asia becomes a minefield of alliances. Africa, a testing ground. The war no one talks about, but everyone fights through someone else. History in this version doesn't explode, it simmers. Germany wins, yes, but it wins alone. On paper, its allies, Austria, Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, share in the glory. But in truth, they rot from within. The Habsburg Empire becomes a museum of bureaucracy. The Ottomans, modernized but exhausted, drift into quiet decay. Germany props them up like faded portraits in an imperial hallway. The world is stable. There are no massive wars, no earth-shattering revolutions. But there's a cost. In Berlin, art flourishes. So does science. Philosophy, too. But all under the watchful eye of the state. Censorship doesn't silence creation. It just redirects it. Painters paint what's allowed. Thinkers write what's approved. Journalists publish what's pre-cleared. Everywhere else, less freedom, fewer surprises. The wild bursts of invention, from jazz in Harlem to surrealism in Paris. They fade or never emerge. The world becomes efficient and a little bit dull. History now is managed, archived before it's lived. Debate is moderated, dissent is diagnosed. And here's the final twist. A young Indian lawyer, Gandhi, never meets his political mentor in South Africa. There's no train incident, no salt march, no quit India. The empire holds because resistance never finds its spark. Colonial revolutions, those messy, defiant shouts of freedom, get delayed, maybe indefinitely. So yes, Germany wins. But something else is lost. Not just democracy, not just freedom. What's lost is unpredictability. The beautiful chaos of history, the churn, the revolt. The idea that a student with a leaflet, a poet with a banned book, or a crowd with nothing left to lose could still rewrite the story. In this timeline, the story is already written, and Berlin holds the pen. The Great War ends. The Kaiser rules. But peace is not the absence of war. It's the pause before the next empire falls. Germany stands tall. Its banners stretch from Brussels to Baghdad. Its allies bow quietly. Its rivals simmer in shadows. The world applauds peace, not realizing it is standing on the edge of something slower and colder. This isn't the inferno of World War II. It's the frostbite of slow domination, a victory that calcifies, a century trapped under glass, beautiful, orderly, and sealed shut. What the world avoids in horror, it pays back in silence. There are no concentration camps, but there are closed borders. No blitz, but no rebellion. No axis, but no movement. The Great War ends. The Kaiser rules. But peace is not the absence of war. It's the pause before the next empire falls. Germany stands tall. Its banners stretch from Brussels to Baghdad. Its allies bow quietly. Its rivals simmer in shadows. The world applauds peace, not realizing it is standing on the edge of something slower and colder. This isn't the inferno of World War II. It's the frostbite of slow domination, a victory that calcifies, a century trapped under glass, beautiful, orderly, and sealed shut. What the world avoids in horror, it pays back in silence. There are no concentration camps, but there are closed borders. No blitz, but no rebellion. No axis, but no movement. And so we're left with the haunting question. If the world had traded the chaos of World War II for the quiet grip of one victorious empire, would we have called that peace, or simply a slower kind of conquest? Empires don't always fall in flames. Sometimes they freeze in place until someone dares to knock. And as for the man who started it all, he never meant to rule the world, only to win a war. But history has a way of turning victories into burdens and empires into cautionary tales.